Today's show, the Locked On Cavs Whip Around is back. We're talking about the Detroit Pistons with Khahil, the Boston Celtics with John Karalis, the Toronto Raptors with Sean Woodley, and finally, the Atlanta Hawks with Brad Rowland. It's all straight ahead on this edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Cade Cunningham, and I cover the Cleveland Cavaliers over at my Substack, The Inside Shot. Thank you for making this edition of Locked On Cavs, this whip around episode, your second listen of the day, because I know you already made the first Monday episode your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Please do us a favor, give us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review. Of course, be a friend, tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure somebody else is subscribed as well. And if you're watching on YouTube as we get started here, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. The Cavs have 4 games this week, starting tonight, second night of a back-to-back for the Cavs, taking on the Detroit Pistons on the road. We've got Khahil going to drop by to talk about that game. Then Wednesday night, they travel to Boston, take on a shorthanded Celtics team. We'll see what Boston looks like in that game, but John Karalis gives us the latest there. Friday night, the Toronto Raptors make their first visit to Cleveland this year. So Sean Woodley drops by, talk about our friends up north. And then finally, next Sunday, the Atlanta Hawks. They come to town. Brad Rowland has the latest there as the Hawks are off to their start to the season. So all of that on today's edition. You don't want to miss any of it. These 4 guys do a great job covering their respective teams. Very excited to have conversations with them leading up to their games against the Cavs. So without anything else from me, here's my conversation first with Khahil. Khahil does a great job covering the Detroit Pistons for us here at the Locked On Podcast Network. And the Cavs take on the Pistons for the first of 4 times today. If you're listening to this on Monday, or if you're listening to this later in the week, game already happened, so you know what happens. But Pistons so far have played 2 games. We're recording this Sunday morning before they take on the Boston Celtics, so that we'll have played 3 games by the time they take on the Cavs on Monday. What have you seen so far that you've liked? What have you seen so far that you have not liked in their 2 games that they've won 1 and they've lost 1, both by a score of 115 to 111, oddly enough?
Yeah, I think to start off with some of the things I haven't liked with them so far is that it looks like Cade's going to have another slow start to the year so far. Every year of his career, he has had like the first week and a half, he started off slow and then he picks it up. They've talked about it all offseason, and then he looked really good in preseason. It was like, okay, maybe this year he'll actually start the year looking like Cade, and we won't have to wait like a week and a half for him, knock off the rust, and for him to heat up. And he hasn't been all bad, obviously, through 2 games, but he hasn't been as consistent as we would have liked to see. It looks like he's still knocking off some rest, and looks like it's going to be a 5th year, 6th year of us dealing with, him just taking the first few games to knock off rest, which is, a little bit disappointing. But he's looked good in a few fourth quarters, though, but hasn't been consistent throughout a game. Some things I have liked, though, this past game especially, they had a full team win. Everyone contributed to it. Caris LeVert's been out. Marcus Sasser has been out. Obviously, Jaden Ivey is out. Jalen Duren gets ejected, but the Pistons show that they have more depth this year that they can go to, that they trust. Guys like Paul Reed, who I think might be the best 3rd center in the NBA for the Pistons. Like, he plays extremely well. Dennis Jenkins comes in, plays well in his limited minutes. Even Chaz Lanier, 2nd-round pick, comes in, doesn't look too rattled, and is able to contribute some minutes. So the Pistons look like they have more depth and more things they can get to, and trust more guys on their team, which is good to see. If they can just get more consistent play from Cade throughout the game, which eventually they obviously will, but they can start getting more consistent play from throughout the game, they should be in a really good spot, because Ausar looks pretty good. Stu looks really good. They're just waiting on their superstar to look like a superstar, not just in the 4th quarter, but from quarter 1 to quarter 4.
You mentioned Jaden Ivey as one of the guys that is currently out for the Pistons, and Caris LeVert, I think, is listed as doubtful for Sunday. We'll see if he plays Monday. But with Ivey in particular, because he missed so much time last season, and I thought he played well in the 30 or so games that he played, but then that leg injury, like, you don't know how a guy is going to come back from that sort of traumatic injury that he had. How important is it, especially because the Pistons and Ivey did not come to a contract extension before this season started? How important is seeing what his fit alongside the superstar version of Cade Cunningham, because I do think Cade is a much better player than he was really the last time we saw him and Ivy together for long stretches. How important is figuring out what that fit looks like for the Pistons this year when Ivy is back?
I mean, it's probably the biggest question. It's not even just his fit with Cade. It's they haven't gotten a sample size of Cade, Ivy, Ausar, Duren really for a long time. Like they haven't gotten that sample size, and that's why they didn't come to an extension agreement this offseason. They want to get more sample sizes to see if this can really work, because they've had mixed results through the first 2 years of their careers. So it was the biggest question entering the year, and I said this during my live while I was hosting a watch party for the game, their second game. I feel bad for Ivy because it feels like he's really just going, like, hopefully this doesn't happen, but it feels like he's kind of just going to end up being screwed over, because if he's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks, which I'm going to say long, it's going to be like 6 weeks. He's going to be reevaluated in 4 weeks, and after the 4 weeks, we'll get an update that says, okay, in 2 weeks, you'll get the next update. That's what I assume is probably going to happen. We're going to be looking at a year since he's touched basketball court, a year since he's played 5-on-5 basketball, which is around January 1st. And then it's not really fair to expect him to miss 12 months of basketball to expect him to be his best self as soon as he comes back. So then you're going to have to give him like 2 to 3 weeks to really knock off the rust, get back into NBA shape. Joel Embiid just talked about this. You can practice all you want. You can do all the conditioning you want. You're not going to get into NBA shape without actually playing NBA basketball. So you're going to have to give him 2 to 3 weeks to really get to his best self. And by then, now you're talking about late January, early February, and the trade deadline's in a week and a half. And we know that the Pistons are wanting to make some decisions with their long-term future, whether it's at the deadline or early in the offseason. So I hope that he's able to get back fast. He's able to start off really great as soon as he comes back. But I feel like Ivy's really just had so many chips stacked against him this year to where things that's out of his control is going to make it incredibly hard for him to really have the year he wanted to have for the Pistons.
And I think it's fair to say a big swing player for just how good the Pistons can be, or maybe where their ceiling is going to be, is what Ausar Thompson looks like. And I know that you are someone personally who loves Ausar Thompson's game. Hard to really disagree with that. It's very, very early in the season. But what so far in the first 2 games that the Pistons have played is different about Ausar from last year?
I think the main thing is that you're starting to see more aggression as a scorer. This second game, he had 16 shot attempts. He rarely ever took more than 12 shot attempts in a game last year. All of it was basically off of dump-offs, offensive rebounds, transition opportunities. It wasn't much self-created looks. And now you're starting to see him. It's only 2 games, but you're seeing him use that aggression that J.B. Bickerstaff, him, and Trajan Langdon talked about all offseason. Cade Cunningham talked about all offseason. That they've worked, that Ausar, has worked on his ball handling and his aggression as a scorer, and it's something they're going to need this year. And in the second game, he was 9 of 16, I believe it was. He had 19 points. He was going to a midi, which looks pretty good for him. He feels pretty confident in this pull-up midi that he's been going after. He had a few really good drives, especially one along the baseline against Jabari Smith Jr. That was pretty good, an in-and-out crossover dribble. That was really nice to see. You know what you're getting from Ausar on defense. You know what you're getting there. They're getting some aggression from him as a scorer, and especially with Ivy out and with Karalis out, you already heard from them that they wanted Ausar to have the ball in his hands more as a creator. You're getting even more of that now because guys are out, and so far I feel like he's stepped out. First game, 11 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, no turnovers. His past game had 1 turnover. The handle looks better. He's handling pressure better. He's handling full court pressure better. He's getting them into the offense. He looks a lot more comfortable with the ball in his hands through 2 games.
What do you think that balance looks like of him having the basketball in his hands when the Pistons are fully healthy, when they do have, obviously Cade playing at a high level, Ausar, but Karis LeVert back, Jaden Ivey back? Like, ideally, what do you think that balance is?
I think when Ivy's back, his best play has come when he's off the ball. Ivy still has a lot of struggles on ball, at least last time we saw him. And in the one preseason game we got to see, which is hard to read into, but it's all we got, through like 5 minutes that they all play together, Ivy was playing a lot off ball to Ausar, to Cade, to the rest of the guys. And he plays really well. He's a good catch and shooter. He's good at attacking gaps. So I think that you'll see Ivy, especially if Ausar plays well with the ball in his hands until Ivy gets back. I think you'll see Ivy used as that off-ball scorer, off-ball cutter, catch and shooter, stuff like that. I think that's how it'll work with Ausar and Ivy. As far as Karalis, I think you've seen it a little bit in the first game, or in not the first game, one of the games in preseason, which is I think they're going to play. My assumption is they're going to play Ausar and Ron with Karalis, a shooter, and Stu, and they're going to want to see Ausar and Ron handle the ball a little bit, but they're going to use Karalis as like that safety blanket where if things aren't going well or things start to go haywire or they turn the ball over or something, they're struggling to get into the offense, they know that they have Karalis that can just get them into some offense and try to get some dribble drives, some dribble kickouts. We haven't got to see Karalis so far during the regular season. But I think Karalis, who was pretty good in in transition this past year, and was a pretty good pick and roll player as well. When you include passes, according to Synergy, I think he's a pretty versatile offensive player that can play off ball and on ball. I think a lot of the Pistons guys are like that. So I think as long as the young guys are continuing to develop, Ausar and Ron, I think those guys can play off ball. But if those guys start to take a step back or start to struggle a little bit with this on ball creation, maybe against better defenses, etc., you got a guy like Karalis you can just give the ball to and say, here you go, let's calm things down, help us out here.
All right, I'll get you out of here with this, but the Cavs and Pistons play for, as I said, the first of 4 times tonight. They meet again early January. Where do you expect the Pistons to grow the most between today and I think it's January 4th when Detroit comes to Cleveland for the first time in the regular season?
I expect their half-court offense to be the biggest thing of growth throughout the season. In the first game of the season, again, we only have 2-game sample size, but in the first game of the season, they lose to the Bulls. They go down by 23 at one point. When you're a team like the Pistons, you should never find yourself down 23 to the Bulls. They ended up tying the game in the fourth quarter. They try to make a big comeback, but you can't dig yourself that big of a hole. And it was due to their half-court offenses looking bad. They weren't getting into their sets quick enough. They didn't look like they were running much offense in the first half. They ended up running into a lot of isolations, a lot of just high pick and roll. That led to Duncan Robinson having a really bad game because Duncan's a guy who feeds off of structure, come off pin downs, come off ball screens, DHOs, and really get some structure going. Obviously, in the second game, Duncan played extremely well. They went through their offense really well in the half court. They got into it early. They weren't getting into it with 10 seconds left on the shot clock. Guys looked a lot more comfortable in what they were doing, and they were making the right reads. So I think the half court offense is something that's going to have to grow. It will grow as the season goes on, especially as they get more accustomed and more comfortable with what exactly they want and see from Ausar Thompson. I think that's one of the big swing factors. They know what they're getting from Cade in the half court. They know what they're getting from Jalen during the half court. They know what they're getting from Duncan. Ausar is like this swing factor. It's okay. Is he good enough now to where we put the ball in his hands a lot more, or is he not showing enough improvement to where we put him back into, this short roll situations and the dunker spot and have him just used as a cutter and stuff? That's the swing factor. Either way, they need to get more accustomed with each other, especially in the half court, man. They had a lot of turnovers with 2 on ball in the second game because they just weren't very accustomed with each other. That's something that's going to have to improve throughout the year.
Well, hopefully Monday night's game between the Cavs and Pistons is a good one. Obviously, the second night of a back-to-back for both of these teams, so we will see what that brings. But if you want more Pistons content, Koo is your man. You can check him out at Locked On Pistons or his Substack, Pistons Kudos. Koo, thanks so much for the time, man.
Appreciate you, man.
My conversation with John Karalis coming up in just a minute. But first, today's show brought to you by Monarch. Let's be honest, most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, investments, it can be easy to lose track. And that can mean leaving money on the table. I don't want to leave money on the table. You don't want to leave money on the table. I don't want you to leave money on the table. So Monarch is the place to be because it's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch can help you organize your accounts, track your spending, get a better handle on your investments, and you never have to touch a spreadsheet. You can review everything with your partner too. If you got that special someone in your life, you can see the shared goals that you two might have. Make better financial decisions together. What's more romantic than that? Monarch visual dashboards and smart tools make it so much easier to understand where your money's going and how to make it work harder for you. So don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA, that is LOCKEDON NBA at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. Again, that is monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Today's show is also brought to you by Game Time. Basketball season, it's officially here. Nothing beats being in the arena for those opening week games. But let's be honest, getting tickets to those games can be a total headache between waiting in queues, surprise fees, prices that jump right before checkout. Nothing drives me crazier than that when trying to buy tickets. It can be easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is hang out and cheer on your favorite team. That's where Game Time comes in, because they're the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. Maybe you want to make the drive up to Detroit on Monday night to watch the Cavs take on the Pistons. If you need tickets, Game Time is the place to go. And even better, right now, if you've never used Game Time before, you need to download the app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA. You'll get $20 off your first purchase if you do that, right? That's a great deal right there. $20 off your first purchase. Terms, of course, to apply. Again, go to LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Swipe, tap, ticket, go with Game Time. Now, John Karalis joins the show. And making his return to the Locked On Cavs podcast is a very happy John Karalis. And I know that because he's very happy to be here. He loves coming on Locked On Cavs. And I can say that because I know him and you don't. John, the Celtics, as we record this, off to an 0-2 start. They play Sunday in the evening against Detroit, which the same case as we just talked about with Khahil. They played the Celtics. So we'll know the outcome of that game by the time you are listening to this. But not necessarily a great start so far for the Celtics. Defense has been an issue. They've allowed a couple of 40-point quarters in their first two games of the season, both against Philadelphia 76ers and the New York Knicks. Just what has stood out to you that has caused them trouble on that end of the floor so far?
They can't rebound the ball right now, and that's going to be an issue all season long. They don't have size. They don't have strong rebounders. They don't have a Josh Hart who can, go in there and grab the ball at 6'4". So defensive rebounding is a massive, massive problem. And we said going into the season that they're never going to be a strong defensive rebounding team. But against the Sixers, they rebounded, against the Knicks, they rebounded 55% of the defensive rebounding. Last year's worst defensive rebounding team was at 68%. So it was they just need to be better at that. Not even good. They just need to be slightly below average would have even helped them against the Knicks. So until they can figure that out, until they can put the effort in there and understand how five guys need to crash, they're going to have these lulls, because now the word is out, right? Every team is going to start crashing hard against the Celtics and daring them to try to grab those rebounds and get out into transition.
I do wonder if that's going to be a league-wide trend early on this season, because the Cavs have had similar issues, and obviously the Cavs, I think, have a little bit more size in their front court right now, considering that they are healthy and they have Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, even Dean Wade to some extent. So, I do wonder if that's going to be a league-wide trend where teams early in the season are going to try and take advantage and just crash the boards. But that's probably a different conversation for a different day. And one of the things that you mentioned when you and I were talking before we pressed record here was that Boston is trying to integrate a lot of new players. And obviously they still have the Jalen Brown, the Derek White. They still have some really good players, but they're trying to put some new guys into the Celtics system. What's that process been like for them so far?
Yeah, it's, tough because their preseason was meaningless. They, in 3 of the games, they didn't play anybody that was playing their regulars. So they were going up against, second string, third string guys on two ways, guys who got cut. So you didn't get a full test. And then you come in and your first game is against Tyrese Maxey. So it's like facing a knuckleballer throwing 60 miles an hour. And all of a sudden here comes a 100 mile an hour, Chapman fastball, at your chin. You're like, whoa. So, Maxey and Edgecombe kind of really threw them for a loop. And, the Knicks playing aggressively is, completely different speed. And it's interesting. After each of the games, I've seen the Celtics lose games before, and I've seen the mood of the team when they lose games. And this is different. This is kind of like there's a lot of acceptance in these losses. Like, yeah, we're going to have to learn, and, we're just going to have to do these things, X, Y, and Z. And, that until we get there, we're going to have some tough times. And getting an Anthony Simons in there, playing a little bit of a different style, asking him to defend at a different level, working in a series of bigs who don't or don't have a history of starting or playing a lot of minutes or having to do all the things they have to do outside of Chris Boucher, who's smaller. It's asking a lot of their defense. It's asking a lot of the cohesion. And then on top of it, you have guys like Jaylen Brown who are being asked to do a lot more than be the big scorer that they used, he's always been. And he has to be more of a distributor and be more aware, has to have a more of a point guard mentality, that's not anything he's ever been. So there's a lot of growing pains in a lot of different areas.
Well, I was going to ask you about Jaylen Brown next, and I know that he's listed as questionable for Sunday's game against Detroit. And again, by the time you listen to this, you'll know whether or not he plays. But as John and I talk, we have no idea. So with that, I don't know if it's like fair to call it a new role for him, but as you mentioned, he is doing different things than he's done before. What do you think the biggest adjustment for him being the guy on this team as Jason Tatum's out? Like, what's that biggest adjustment area been?
Listen, I will call it a new role. I will say it because it's all mental. It's all the mental stuff that he has to adjust to. And like I said, when you're the guy, it's not like Jason's out and I have to be the primary scorer for a few games while he's nursing something. It's you're coming into the season, you are the primary guy and like by far the most talented player on the team. So like I said, the point guard mentality of being aware that, hey, this guy hasn't gotten a lot of shots and I got to make sure he gets the ball a little bit. Being aware that somebody like Neemias Queta has worked his butt off to actually defend the rim because he's the one, like the biggest guy that they have. And, 3 straight possessions, he's done something good on the defensive end. And all he's doing is sitting picks on the other side. Let me get Nimi a bucket. Let me get him a shot. That kind of stuff is something that your point guards always think of and have to be aware of. But as the primary scorer, you don't think about that. You're just like, how do I get my guy? How do I get an advantage? How do I score? All of that stuff. So that part of the adjustment, getting in there and rebounding, being aware that you have to crash. You can't just be an outlet. You have to crash and make the outlet pass. So it's asking him to do things that he's capable of, but has never had to think of. And that's I think his biggest adjustment. It's the mental, how you think the game stuff that he has to get used to.
So Wednesday is the first matchup between these two teams, and then the Celtics will come to Cleveland at the end of November, November 30th, almost a month after their first matchup. When I have you on this podcast in about a month to talk about that game that'll be upcoming, what do you anticipate, where do you anticipate the Celtics will be the most improved from where they are right now?
I think there'll be a more cohesive team just from the reps and from the failures that, you'll probably crush the Celtics the first time around. You'll probably just dominate the offensive boards, go up 30, and it'll be a tough haul after that. And the Celtics are a team that's good enough where if you relax after you go up 30, they'll cut it back down to 10 like they did against New York. But if you're playing your best and attacking their disadvantages, you can put up a lot of points in a hurry. The next time you play them, you probably see a lot more boxing out. You probably see a lot more understanding, a lot more figuring out who's communicating on the back line and calling out coverages. Because again, that might fall on Jaylen Brown a lot more, and he's never had to do that. So by the time you get to the end of November, and maybe this is a little hopeful on my part, you'll see a lot more communication, a lot more pointing and yelling and all of that stuff, and guys being in better position. You might still win that game because I don't think the Celtics are quite good enough to beat the elite teams in the NBA, not on a consistent basis, but it'll be a tougher game. And I think that's a sign of progress that I think the Celtics need to show.
Well, it'll be a very interesting journey to follow, not only between now and November 30th, but I think throughout the course of the year with the Boston Celtics. Johnny, you do a great job covering the team. If you want more Celtics content, make sure you go check him out at Locked On Celtics or the Boston Sports Journal. John, thanks so much for doing this, man.
You got it, man.
Thanks to John Karalis for his time, and my conversations with Sean Woodley and Brad Rowland are coming up in just a second. But first, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA, it's back. It's glorious, and it's back. And there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of a game, or maybe you just want to see how the game begins before you have a feel of how you think things are going to go, and possibly someone gets hot late, you want to ride that hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps everything in every game exciting, especially when your team making that late push or trying to hold off a late push, as we've seen with the Cleveland Cavaliers in the past couple of games. Cavs, they're favored on Monday night on the road against the Pistons, -2.5 points, second night of a back-to-back for both teams. Don't necessarily know as of right now who's going to play in this one. We don't have injury reports, so I just think that is something to monitor. But in the NFL, we've got Monday Night Football tonight because Kansas City is taking on Washington. KC -11.5 in this one. No Jaden Daniels for the Commanders. I like Kansas City. I think that they get this win. I think that they've been playing some great football lately. I think they're starting to turn the corner, starting to look like the team I expect to win the Super Bowl. So if that sounds good to you and you're a new customer to FanDuel, know what's going to sound better to you? $300 in bonus bets, because when you win your first $5 bet, you'll get just that, $300 in bonus bets to use all over the FanDuel app. So head to FanDuel.com today. That is FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Here to talk Raptors, not the Blue Jays, even though he's got a Jays jersey on. The Jays are in the World Series. I think that series is 1-1 right now. I think most of America probably actually rooting for the team from Canada in that series, but we're not here to talk about that.
We're not? Come on, ask me about
No. I don't know. I don't know how many members of the Blue Jays my audience could name. I really don't know. I could name several, but I don't know, because a lot of them actually played for the Cleveland Guardians once upon a time. There are a lot of Cleveland Guardians on that team, which maybe makes it hurt in Cleveland a little bit, like the fact that Andres Jimenez, doing some good things over there, right?
You could have had Ernie Clement hit 500 for you in the playoffs.
Yeah, that would have been nice. He didn't do that here, and that's why the Jays are in the World Series and the Cleveland Guardians have been at home for 3 weeks. That's why that happened. But I think most of America is rooting for that team.
As they should. It's the noble, correct choice against the evil empire that is the Dodgers. We can talk about basketball now, though, if you'd like, Danny.
All right, fine. We'll talk about the Toronto Raptors because the Cavs played them for the first time this season on Friday of this week. It is very prestigious, very important NBA Cup game. The Raptors enter this week with a record of 1-2. They beat the Hawks on opening night. They lost to the Bucks. They lost to a Dallas Mavericks team that does not have a point guard. They play again tonight. If you're listening to this on Monday, they take on the Spurs in Texas. So we'll see what happens there. But Sean, what have your impressions over the first week been of your dinosaurs, man?
Yeah, a bit of a mixed bag, although very thrilled to be back watching a team that's competitive and playing in reasonably close games and doesn't look like they're just trying to mail it in and not win the basketball games. It's been refreshing to see that after a couple of years in the wilderness. It's, again, very sort of, it depends on the guy, depends on the night, how you're feeling about this team. Scotty Barnes has been fantastic to start the year, 24, 7 and 6. He's, banging threes, small sample, low volume, but it's been encouraging to see. Brandon Ingram has just been a great infusion of offensive punch to the Raptors half court. They've been really bad as a half court offensive team for years now, and he has made them very adequate. And that's been nice to see. RJ Barrett can't miss a shot right now. There's been some mixed reviews from Emmanuel Quickley and Jakob Poeltl to fill out the starting lineup. The bench has kind of been a hot and cold, but yeah, all told, it's a better place to be than we were the last couple seasons. And I think the stuff that didn't go well for the Raptors in their first 3 games, I think a lot of that stuff is iron outable, if that's a sentence or a term that I can use. And I think a lot of it will just come down to more reps for the starting 5, who, by the way, didn't play basketball together until like the 5th game of the preseason and have still very, sparing reps together. And I think that is going to iron itself out over time. Their loss to the Bucks was basically purely a byproduct of 5 guys playing crunch time in a real basketball game for the very first time together and forgetting what to do.
Where do you think that the, lack of cohesion or lack of continuity early in the season shows up the most for Toronto?
The defense right now, for sure. The offense has been fine, and they've been able to get out on the run, and they've been kind of able to pad their offensive stats with some really great transition numbers. In the half court on defense, they're just, and in transition on defense too, just like a lack of connectivity. Jakob Poeltl also right now is playing very bad basketball. He had a back thing in the preseason, didn't play for most of the preseason, didn't really practice a ton. He's very clearly trying to get himself back into game shape for a team that runs a ton. And, he's had some foul trouble in the games he's played so far this year as well. And that's just led to kind of a Swiss cheese defense for the Raptors. Their pick and roll coverage has not been super great. They're playing this very aggressive style of defense where they're asking their guard defenders and their wing defenders to really get up in the shirt of the ball handler at all times, high pickup points, picking up full court, very Pacers-like, and how they're trying to approach defense. And, in some cases, guys are just kind of failing to execute stuff they're usually pretty good at. In some cases, they're asking guys who maybe aren't amazing at that high pressure defense to go and do stuff they're not necessarily suited for. And I think they'll adjust. I think they'll find the happy medium here. But when you don't have that connectivity in the back end, whenever something slips through because you've been over aggressive at the point of attack, you're just letting up a layup line essentially, right? And that was really the case in that game against the Mavericks on Sunday. Just not much in the way of backline resistance. Scotty Barnes is doing what he can. He's been fantastic on that end, but Jakob Poeltl getting caught out in space, just kind of not knowing where to stand within the Raptors defense right now, which is strange for him, a guy whose whole thing is that he knows where to stand. I'm sure that will figure itself out, but if it doesn't, it's a problem because he is like the lone sort of true rim protecting center they have on this team. Sandro Mamukelashvili, damn, I almost got it. Sandro Mamukelashvili is really good as a second unit sort of spacing agent for the bench, but he's not a defensive center. He's like 6'9". He doesn't really protect the rim. He's way more an offensive tilted guy. Jakob Poeltl has to be better at the back line. They have to figure out a way to put him in the right positions to succeed defensively as well. In that game against the Mavericks, he was chasing Cooper Flagg on the perimeter, chasing Anthony Davis on the perimeter, and it just left him unable to cover the ground he needed to cover to be where he needed to be.
So I want to ask you about Brandon Ingram because obviously he's the new guy in town, right? Like he was an acquisition last year during the season, did not play a single game for Toronto after he was acquired via trade from the New Orleans Pelicans. In his first 3 games with the Raptors this year, averaging 22 points, doing it pretty efficiently, over 50, 40, 80 split so far. What do you think has allowed him to fit in kind of seamlessly, I guess would be the best way to describe it with Toronto?
I think he's just been very bought into playing the way the Raptors want him to play while also bringing a little bit of his own sort of iso ball thing, which is a thing this team kind of needed, right? Like the Raptors have always been under Darko Rajakovic, like a high shot quality team. They create good looks. They just can't finish them. And Brandon Ingram is a very good play finisher. And so they've injected him into a lot of their sort of heavy movement sets. They're doing a great job getting him the ball on the move, coming around handoffs, coming around pin downs, just kind of getting to his office 18 feet away where he can just take uncontested mid-range jumpers. And those go in a lot of the time when you're Brandon Ingram. He's also helped with their rim pressure. He's been really good attacking closeouts, getting downhill, drawing help, and then passing out from there or scoring through 2-3 bodies because he just can do that because he's so long and talented and dexterous. It's just been a nice marriage there. But then, you get into the possessions where, 16, 18 seconds have gone by and not much has happened. You can just throw it to Brandon Ingram and he can go and get a bucket for you too, which is the thing they just did not have the last couple seasons. He's been eager to take catch and shoot threes. He's working in some pull-up stuff. He's taking 4 threes a game so far this year. I'd like to see that maybe tick up to 5 or 6, but he's been eager and willing. And again, he's drawing really heavy closeouts with, he's a very good shooter. He kind of always has been. And Brandon Ingram attacking a closeout has been just like a godsend for this offense. Just kind of continue layering advantage upon advantage throughout possessions to get good looks off. Their half-court offense looks way better than it has at any point in the last 5 years. It's been a nice, refreshing thing to see, and it's pretty clear that Ingram finding that balance between his old self and what the Raptors are asking him to become within their system has been a really big reason why.
So typically when I do these episodes, I have like a common question that I will ask everybody who comes on the episode. And it's this week, it's where do you think your team will look the most different the next time they play the Cavs? And the Raptors play the Cavs Friday, then they play the Cavs 13 days later, they come back to Cleveland. And then 11 days after that, the Cavs play in Toronto. So like all 3 matchups between the Cavs and the Raptors are super condensed. So I'm not going to ask where they're going to be in 2 weeks, but rather when the Cavs come to Toronto, the week of American Thanksgiving, which that's a November 24th game. What do you think will be the most different between the Raptors now and then?
I would guess they've figured out some stuff on the defensive end. I think, again, Jakob Poeltl, is it just getting up to game shape? Is it shaking off the back injury? I don't know. I don't think he forgot how to play basketball. He's a very good, perfectly cromulent, middle of the pack starting center. I don't think he's just completely fallen off the cliff at age 30. I think he's going to figure it out. And I think they'll figure out how to best use him within their schemes as well. And I think as well, again, that sort of connection on defense I talked about, that's going to come through more reps. I think there have been a couple of guys out of the lineup who I think are big parts of what their defensive identity ought to be. Colin Murray-Boyles, their sort of defensive ace rookie, played his first game in the NBA on Sunday after missing the first couple with a forearm injury. Didn't do much, but I think he's going to get comfortable. They're going to ask him to do a lot defensively because he's ready. Like, you look at this dude, he has an NBA body already. He's got great hands. He slides his feet. He had a possession against Cooper Flagg on Sunday night where Flagg ended up getting a bucket out of it, but he had to work for it for like 12 seconds working downhill, bumping off of Murray-Boyles. Murray-Boyles just staying on his spot. I think he's going to be an awesome defender basically from day one. And then Jacoby Walter hasn't played so far this season either. He is a really, really good point of attack defender who fits exactly what they're looking for from their guards and their wings, on the defensive end. And I think he's going to be a big part of kind of getting them back to that identity as well. And just kind of having another guy in the mix who is good at the stuff that they're asking their guys to do. All that comes together. I don't think this is going to be necessarily like a top 5 defensive team like they were for the back half of last season, but I think they'll flirt with top 10. I think there's too much defensive talent between Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl at his best, and those guys coming in off the bench to kind of just wreak havoc. And then I think they'll figure it out, but certainly the defense is pretty unspooled right now. Would imagine just through more reps and time and hopefully some recovery for Poeltl's back and getting up to game speed that they'll be fine and playing a way more connected brand of defensive basketball in that late November matchup.
Well, the Raptors should be an interesting watch, I think, throughout this season. I think they're a team that is certainly capable of crashing the Eastern Conference playoff picture. We'll see if that happens. But Sean, thanks so much for doing this. Thanks for being one of our favorite Canadians. I can't call you my favorite. I think Justin Rowland would get pretty mad at me if I did that. But
what about Anthony Bennett? Am I above or below Anthony Bennett?
I think that you see, that's tough because he was traded for Kevin Love, and Kevin Love won a title here. Anthony Bennett on the surface, you're above. Andrew Wiggins on the surface, you're above. But Anthony Bennett and Andrew Wiggins combined to bring Kevin Love to town. So I think that is something that is worth just thinking about as we power rank our favorite Canadians. But best of luck to your Jays as well.
Please just tell me I'm ahead of Tristan Thompson. Please.
Oh, probably not. Probably not. Probably not.
That's rough.
Tristan's number might be going in the rafters one day. Tristan's number might be going in the rafters one day. And this podcast appearance probably won't be going in the rafters. But Sean, thank you so much. If you want more Raptors coverage, check him out over at Locked On Raptors. And here now is Brad Rowland from Locked On Hawks covering a very interesting team, a team a lot of people have picked to finish inside the top 4 of the Eastern Conference. I am one of those people that has picked that. And Brad, the Hawks obviously look different than they did when the season wrapped up last year. What to you has been the biggest change so far in the 3 games that we've seen from Atlanta this season?
Yeah, I think they're definitely still getting comfortable with each other, which isn't not surprising when you talk about the overall that they had, adding Porzingis, adding Alexander Walker, adding Luke Kennard. Also, the Hawks are dealing with injuries like a lot of teams are right now, but they just played the 2 of the first 3 games without Porzingis, who is like the X factor that they're trying to incorporate everything. He's been out with an illness. So it's like they're kind of trying to get their footing, and they had a really pretty ugly flop on opening night that kind of maybe colored things a little bit. But I think in general, there have been signs of what you want to see from this Hawks team. At the same time, they're clearly not at the fully formed portion of what they're supposed to be.
What do you think is missing from that? Because it's not fair to expect them to be fully formed in the month of October. Like the goal of every organization is to be fully formed in April, May, and June, not in October, November, December. But what areas do you see them as what will change from now to their final form of the 2025-2026 Hawks?
Yeah, I mean, one that we've already seen in the first 3 games. The first night, they had one of the worst transition defensive performances I've ever seen, actually. I think it was like they had never played basketball together in the first game against Toronto. They gave up 86 points in the paint, and most of those were in transition, and it was like they were just breaking down everywhere. And, I don't want to excuse that because it was bad. But also the next 2 games were like very normal again defensively, to where like the sky was falling in the opener and now it seems pretty normal again, for example. But I think just cohesion on offense is probably the thing that I'm circling the most. Like when it's looked good, it's looked really good, but the ball hasn't been pinging around the way that I know Quinn Snyder wants it to. They're trying to figure out roles, like secondary ball handling is already a question for this team. It kind of always is in the Trae Young era, and has still not been quite solved yet, despite some Nickeil Alexander-Walker flashes, for example. And, spacing on offense, all the things that like were questions coming in and questions that they were trying to fix. I would say the offensive process stuff has been pretty good, but the results haven't been quite there yet. So they kind of have to get up to speed there because, like it or not, like the theory of the case for this Hawks team, they have to be a top 10 offense probably to be where they want to go. And they just haven't been that to this point.
Jalen Johnson, a guy that missed a lot of time in Atlanta last year, played 36 games and then missed the end of the season or I guess really the second half of the season because of a shoulder surgery. What have you seen so far from him in the first 3 games that the Hawks have played?
Yeah, he looked really, really good. He was probably the brightest spot of the opening loss. He did kind of tweak an ankle in game 2 and missed the third game on a back-to-back with travel. I think it was probably more precautionary from what I can gather from where I'm sitting here in Atlanta. But he's looked the part. He's looked physical, even in the preseason where like you don't want to overjudge anything. All I was looking for with Jalen Johnson was like, hey, is he playing with any hesitation at all? Is he playing assertively? A 6-month injury basically with a labrum tear, and he looks the part. I mean, he's checking all the boxes, the offensive creation, the transition ability as a grab and go guy. He's always been an elite rebounder. Like he's that, well-rounded 6'9", 6'8", that every team in the league is looking for. And other than his jump shot, which is still kind of a work in progress, everything else, like the boxes are all checked. And for me, the biggest thing is like, does he look right physically? And he definitely does so far.
I know Kristaps Porzingis has not played in all 3 games that the Hawks have had as we sit here and talk on Sunday afternoon. I know he's only played so far in one of them. Now, he had a good night, 20.7 boards, a couple assists in that game. How long do you think that it will take for the partnership between him and Trae Young to really reach its, potential, maybe the word that I'm looking for here?
I think it might take a little while just because he is such a dynamic player. And that's a good thing. But the Hawks have had just no one resembling what he does in the entire Trae Young era. And I think they all kind of know that. I think he knows that. I think Trae knows it. Quinn knows it. They're kind of trying to incorporate a very different piece. And Porzingis is not like the easy, I'm not necessarily hard to play with, but he's in different spots than a lot of centers. Like he's mostly pick and pop guy, not a dynamic lob threat, but also he's like an in-between scorer who kind of does isolations and like, he's a focal point of an offense in a way the Hawks have only had at that position at any point. So I think the biggest thing is that Quinn Snyder's been saying the same thing, just more and more reps. And unfortunately, he got this flu-like symptoms that cost him 2 games early on. But same thing as Jalen Johnson, same thing with really all of these things. There have been little flashes of like Trae and Kristaps kind of forming a partnership that's coherent. And I think the upside of that is just like very obviously quite high with the ability to kind of work in different areas of the floor. But it's going to take a few weeks, maybe even a couple of months for it to be like the fully formed version, which Hawks fans don't want to hear. But whenever you have a brand new guy like that, especially one that may not play in every game because he usually doesn't do that, it might take a little bit longer than if he was playing, every single night.
The other big acquisition Atlanta made this summer, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. What have you thought of him through 3 games in a Hawks uniform?
I've liked what I've seen. Hawks fans, I think, were a little bit jarred by the green light that he has as a shooter/scorer early on. I was not surprised by that. I think part of the pitch to him was that, hey, you could do a little bit more here than you were doing in Minnesota. And that's part of why he signed with the Hawks, I think. It wasn't to say he's not going to suddenly take 20 shots a game, but I think that they do think he's got a little bit more on-ball juice as a backup secondary creator, for example, more off-the-dribble game. And actually, there's been a couple of really impressive flashes to the rim on some creative drive, creative finishes. But he also shot 1 of 10 from 3 against Orlando. Like, those things are going to happen. This is a guy who's like a proven 38% three-point shooter. I'm not necessarily worried about that. And then I think defensively, he's fit in right away. Like, it helps him to not have to be the number 1 defender. They had Dyson Daniels, who is going to be in that role as long as he is available. But having a guy like Nickeil being the number 2 defender on the perimeter is very, very nice as far as luxury is concerned, particularly when you had Trae Young on your team. To have 2 awesome perimeter defenders to kind of flank him makes a lot of sense. So he hasn't been efficient yet, but other than that, I think I've liked what they've done with him so far, having him be a little bit more aggressive and kind of filling in some gaps on both ends of the floor.
I know that they didn't have him in the starting lineup in the first game. Zachary Richichet obviously did play in the first game, didn't play in the next 2. Do you think that long-term they view Nah as a starter, or is that a piece that they want to have coming off the bench?
I think his most likely role in Atlanta is going to be sixth man as kind of a permanent, sixth or seventh man, depending on how you feel about Onyeka Okongwu. But I think because that Dyson Daniels is entrenched, they extended him, they love him, and Ricochet, number 1 overall pick, all that. I think if you said who's the better player, like at this very moment, Khahil or Ricochet, I think the answer is Khahil. But I think in 6 months or maybe shorter than that, it's going to be Ricochet, and the Hawks believe it will be that. And he's more of a prototypical 3. I think Khahil is mostly a 2, like primary position-wise. He's not the biggest guy in the world. So a little bit more length on the floor with Ricochet makes sense. And I think Dyson is just ahead of Khahil in the pecking order, but that's not a bad thing. I think Khahil is comfortable in that role as well. And the Hawks kind of have been messaging this. I think it's true. They effectively have 7 starters on this team. I think whichever center is not starting, which I think is going to be Okongwu most of the time, and Alexander Walker are really going to play like 28, 30 minutes a night, even if they're not starting. And the Hawks are like pretty comfortable with that arrangement, I think.
So next Sunday is Cavs-Hawks first matchup of the season. Then they play again the day after Thanksgiving in Atlanta. So that is November 28th. What do you expect to be most different about the Hawks when you and I speak again the week of Thanksgiving, heading into that second matchup between these two teams?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that what I would hope is different for them is that they're a little bit more established with their offensive profile and getting the shots that they want. I think that there have been times or maybe, quarters, half quarters where they're getting the process that they want. But I think the ideal Quinn Snyder offense was, last season they were a top 5 shot profile team. They just didn't have the shot makers to capitalize on shot profile. When I say that, I mean shots at the rim, quality from 3, corner threes, etc. And it doesn't mean ignoring the mid-range entirely, but I think getting the shots from where they want to get them from is a work in progress right now because of all of the new pieces and kind of figuring it all out. And Trae Young on the ball, Trae Young off the ball, all those little things. And I think with cohesion in another month, as we're talking right now, you'll see that kind of get back to where they were last year in a good way about getting to the rim a lot, but also getting a lot more threes up than they have so far, and having those kind of the upgrades that they made this summer manifest with more shot making, because that was the whole theory. It was like, hey, get these same shots, but have better shot makers. And that hasn't quite come together so far. But I think in a month from now, we'll kind of see more of that case.
If you want to learn more about the Atlanta Hawks, if you want to just maybe keep up with a potential playoff opponent for the Cleveland Cavaliers down the line, Brad is your guy. Make sure you go check him out at Locked On Hawks. And Brad, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, man.
Thanks, Danny.
Big thanks to Koo, big thanks to John, big thanks to Sean, and of course, big thanks to Brad. Very much appreciate those guys taking some time to jump on Locked On Cavs and talk about their respective teams as they take on the Cavaliers this week. Obviously, tonight's game against Detroit should be a fun one. We'll see who plays in that. I will be up there, so make sure you keep it locked right here at Locked On Cavs for the latest on the team following that game. And you can find this show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. If you're watching on YouTube too, as we get out of here, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. And I will be back tomorrow talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.